thanks very much for agreeing to do this. Now let's talk a little bit about my grandmother, your mom.
Good,
Tell
I'd
me,
like to.
You have a few memories or anything you want to tell me about?
I want to tell you a little bit about her because she was really a great person, and I wish you could have known her and she could have known you. We moved to California when I was 3, and she and my father separated. They never were divorced, but they never lived together again after that. So she was it. She was my whole family out there. We did have a sister-in-law living in the same neighborhood, but she bought a home across town from her sister-in-law, which was probably the smartest thing she ever did. So we were on one side of San Diego, and they were on the other. But Mother went to work. We didn't have any money, and she started first as making salads in a high school cafeteria. She wanted to work for the school so she would have vacation time with her 2 young daughters. And then soon she was running a school cafeteria herself. But so I was a latchkey kid and had a working mother long before anybody else thought of that kind of thing. But she was an amazing woman. She never lost her style and she never lost her courage. And there are a couple of stories I'd like to tell you. She was carried an insurance policy on my father, where you send in $2 a month or one of those funny kind of policies. And she carried it right straight through the whole time. He had tuberculosis, and he did come to California when I was about 8 or 10, but he never lived with us. He was always in a TB sanitarium. So she kept paying these $2 every month, and when he died, she put in a claim. And the insurance company said, we're not paying it because we hadn't received the last $2. It was in transit. It was in the mail. And of course, it was a policy for $1,000, which would have meant a great deal to us at that point. But Mother went to the father of a friend of mine who was an insurance adjuster and said, what can I do? And he said, Miss Julian, he said, this is a terrible company. I wish I'd known you were dealing with them because they are no good. He said, you have every right for this $1,000, and if we went to court, we could get it, but it would cost you more than $1,000 to do it. He said, you're smartest just to forget it. So she said, okay. And probably swallowed hard and never mentioned it again. Never poor me, never how could they do this to me? None of that. It was just forgotten, which I thought was very classy for her to do.
What was the reason for not paying?
Well, they said the premium hadn't been received. The last premium hadn't been received. It was a dishonest company. She had mailed it, but they hadn't gotten it yet.
So why not just wait until they got it and then?
I don't know. I don't know what it was, but anyway, they were doing her out of the money. It was that kind of an insurance company.
Just cheating her.
They were just cheating her, and they got by with it
Okay.
because it would have cost more than. But I think the man, my friend's father, gave her good advice, except that it was just amazing to me that she never.
Yeah, no, it is
that
amazing.
she never felt sorry for herself, or because she was brought up a little rich girl in Kingston, Tennessee. And she fell in love with a teacher in high school. They had a great romance going. And in order to break up the romance, her father sent her to Vienna for 6 months with Dr. C.B. Jones, with Uncle Doctor. He was going over there, he and his wife, they had no children. He was going over there to learn how to take tonsils out. He was the first doctor in Knoxville to ever remove tonsils, and he found out, he learned in Vienna. So they sent this little lovesick high school girl with her uncle and aunt to Vienna for 6 months to break up the romance with the high school teacher. And Mother came back and went on had 2 years of college there at the American University in Harriman. But she was special, and she would have been great. She died when she was 60, which is much too young. But she was.
What year was that, Mom?
Well, it was. You were born in 57.
57.
It was 56. She died between. See, she saw Tom.
Right.
We took him up to the hospital to see her when she was dying, and he was not quite a year old. So she saw Tom, but she didn't ever get to see you. But she was. I wish you could have known her because she was great. She really was. She was a dear, good looking too. But her mother must have died of cancer. Of course, nobody knew cancer back then. But the story was that her mother just went to bed and suffered terribly and died, and left the grandfather Martin with 4 children. That was Aunt Reese, the oldest sister, my Aunt Reese, your great aunt, and Aunt Adelia, who was CM's mother, and Ruth, and then James, the son, the boy, 4 children. And grandfather was a fine man. This would be my mother's father, but obviously not the best businessman in the country. But he was.
Why do you say that?
Well, he just did some funny things. One of the stories that Mother liked to tell on him was about the carload of tires. Have I told you this before?
Yeah.
He bought, anyway, he was going to master the automobile was fairly new.
This is your mother's father.
This is my mother's father.
Yeah.
He was going to get in on this great new thing, these automobiles. So he bought a trainload of rubber tires and had them delivered here in Knoxville. And he happened to buy them just about the time the pneumatic tire came out.
Oh,
So of course his were just useless. He lost a lot of money, a lot of property, and just had to sell a lot of things to get out of that hole.
Oh,
But he was a sweet man. He used to come see us in California. He had these 3 daughters, one in Wheat, Tennessee, which is outside Harriman, and one in Fort Lauderdale, and one in California. And he'd travel by train and spend 4 months with each daughter. And he was a shaggy old man by then, and he was, I'm ashamed to say, he was always kind of embarrassing to me because he was just kind of old and rough. But he loved his daughters, and he had a good time. I mean, he never took a Pullman, didn't want to get undressed on the plane, but always sit up in a seat, always got his pockets picked, always got his money stolen while he was asleep in the train, but went faithfully for, say 5 or 6 years. He'd do that.
And he didn't have a home at that point.
Didn't have a home.
Just stay with his daughters for 4 months at a time.
Yeah. He had a stroke when he was with us in San Diego, and he had a great fear of hospitals. That was the age then. You didn't go to the hospital except to die.
Right.
That was what hospitals were for in his day.
Yeah.
And so he didn't say, please don't take me to the hospital. Please don't send me. But Mother had to, and he did die in the hospital. And she sent his body back here, and he's buried there in Kingston. But he was something. Aunt Mildred and Mama came to see us while we were in San Diego. Mother bought a house, a 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. It's a nice, steady neighborhood, not anything flashy. And it had a garage apartment. You've seen it. When we were in San Diego, we went by Jackdaw Street.
Yeah.
And sometimes when things were good, we rented the apartment and lived in the house, and when things were tough, we rented the house and lived in the apartment. The apartment was one big, like a sunroom with windows all around, and then had a bathroom, kitchen, and 1 bedroom. So that meant I slept in the living room on a day bed, and Lucy and Mother shared the bed in the 1 bedroom when we were in the apartment. And then when things got better, we'd move to the house. But one time, this is another Mother story that I think it tells a lot about her. We had the garage apartment rented to 2 men who were working at Consolidated Aircraft. Nice young man, working in the aircraft business. And Mother and I came home. Lucy must have been married by now, because I guess I was in college, or high school anyway. And we came home one afternoon, Mother and I, into the house, and one of the men was there with one of my dresses on, in the bathroom, putting on makeup, with my good black dress on. And Mother didn't panic or anything, because I was struck dumb. And she said, come in here this minute and sit down at that table, and you stay right there till the police come. And she called the police, and they came and got him. And he was cowed. I mean, he sat there in my dress until the police got there. And she didn't prosecute or anything. She didn't go after him. But I always thought, boy, that took some guts for her to do that with that man. And of course, typical of the times, we had the dress cleaned, and I wore it for years. You didn't throw things away back then. You didn't get rid of things just because they'd been ill used.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's what those things I wanted to tell you about Mother, because she was an interesting person. She had a strange life, because she had many ups and downs.
Yeah. And did you leave San Diego? When did you leave San Diego and come back here?
Well, we went first. We moved to. Lucy was living in Long Beach, and I left San Diego and went to Oakland to teach school with 3 other friends. We had an apartment together, and we had a great time. Just a real good fun. All 4 of us had gone through college together, and all 4 of us were teachers, and we all got jobs in the Oakland school system, and rented an apartment together. This was during the war.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mother, I think, moved to Long Beach and bought a home to be near Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
And then gradually I spent a year in Long Beach, and then I moved back. Then I left to go back east to teach school on Long Island. So school teaching was very good to me, because it gave me a nice, safe, secure job that I could jump around the country and always have a position waiting for me. So it was fun. I was going to say a little bit about Oakland. This was during the war, and I worked as a candy striper in an army hospital, which was a revelation to me because the doctor was the officer, and he gave the orders to the non-com, and the non-com gave them to the nurse, and the nurse gave them to me, and I did all the dirty work that nobody else wanted. It was my first experience with army hierarchy.
But this is while you're
I'm
teaching.
teaching. I did this
Doing
Saturdays
on the side.
Saturdays and evenings
For the war effort.
for the war effort. And I also drove a truck. I drove a monster big truck to the blood bank, and I'd call on about 4 blood banks late in the afternoon and back my truck into the loading dock, and they'd wheel out these big racks of blood that they'd collected that day, and then I'd take them to the factory to make into plasma, and then return the truck to the garage. And the truck had about 12 gears, and I only knew where 4 of them were, so I'd use the 4 gears. But I mean, I was way up high. It was a monster truck. I would never have the nerve to drive a truck like that through bay traffic anymore. It was unbelievable how I had the gall. But I had to take a course in auto maintenance to be qualified to do it, so that was interesting. Of course, I didn't ever have to maintain anything, but I had to know something about the truck to do it.
I hadn't heard that story before.
No, that I was a truck driver. You didn't know I was.
No.
Oh, Charlie. But
So, and after Oakland, I'm sorry, you went...
after Oakland, I went back to Long Beach and taught for a year, and then I went out. Then I went to New York, taught in Long Island and Great Neck for a year or 2 years, and then I went to Germany to teach. And that came about just through an ad in the paper. The Army was looking for teachers. This was at the time of the Berlin Lift, and I answered an ad. And that was great. That was a great experience.
The Berlin Lift being what exactly?
When was that? 70.
But what was it?
Oh, the Berlin Lift was when Germany closed the highway. When Russia closed the highway, it would no longer let auto traffic go from our zone to their zone, and closed the front line. See, the Russians had a zone, and the British had a zone, and we had a zone after the war. They always said the Russians got all the industry, and the British got the agriculture, and we got the scenery. We got the pretty part. We got Bavaria and all that, but those were the 3 zones that Germany was divided into. Then there was big old Russia over here.
Right.
And but they closed their borders.
This is really the beginning of the Cold War.
Yeah,
Right.
because see, Berlin was divided into sections too. The city of Berlin was divided into sections.
Right.
And we couldn't get to our American section in Berlin because they shut the border.
Right.
So when we started flying food in, like milk and potatoes. Do you want to get the phone?
Just let the machine get it. I don't
Okay.
know.
With real food, just to keep people in our section alive. That's what we were going after, taking supplies to our Americans who were in the American section of Berlin.
And what was that like being there? You were teaching American
I was teaching
kids of servicemen.
The Army base at Rhine, Maine just ballooned when the lift started because they had to bring over all these extra soldiers to maintain these planes. It was a night and day operation. So when they brought all these extra soldiers over, then they let them bring their families. And so that was the children, those were the children that I was teaching.
Because it was safe enough to have the kids there then.
And it was in a lovely neighborhood, very much like Sequoia Hills, in a great big 5-bedroom house that they kicked a German family out of so the teachers could have it. And Army issued us furniture, which was skimpy but adequate. They didn't have a stove in the house when we got there. We all screamed and hollered. They said, you can't have 5 women in a house and no stove. So they found us a stove and got us all set up so we could cook some meals. There was an officers club right near us in the neighborhood. We could walk to a lovely officers club, which we did often, but we still wanted to be able to cook.
And you're being paid for this.
Being paid for this.
Yeah, this is a job.
Yeah, this is a job. We had a great big woodsy front yard. We used to have picnics out in our front yard, cook hot hamburgers, cook hot dogs. We made enough so we could build a fire, and the yard was deep.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And it was a nice home. Really good.
How long did that go on?
I stayed a year. I traveled the first summer I went over, taught a year, and then traveled the second summer, and then came home.
Right.
But in the meantime, Mother had moved to Knoxville. So when I came home, instead of going back to California, I came here.
And Lucy
was married and living in Long Beach.
In Long Beach, right. And so you moved back to Knoxville.
Moved back to Knoxville. And I didn't want to teach anymore. I went to work for advertising department at Miller's, writing copy for the ads.
Right.
And enjoyed it very much. And that was when I first wrote Miss Pickett.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, when I came home from school. Came home from Germany. I left teaching school.
So how old are you at this point?
Where are we? Let's see. I think I was in Germany in 47 and 48. I'd have to look it up, but that was about 1948. I'd have been about 25.
Right. And what gave you the idea to come home from give up teaching and write children's books?
Well, I was just kind of worn out with teaching. It can do that to you. But
yeah, you were teaching what grades over there?
I had third and fourth over there, combandation grade.
No, I could see.
Had a great time. We had a German teacher assigned to us as an aide, and of course we had German classes. We taught the where the children were learning German.
Right.
So it was a very nice experience. Very nice. I've kept in touch with only one of those teachers that I lived with, but they were a nice group.
Which one of you?
We bought a car. She and I bought a Jeep together. It was a Jeep that somebody had put a station wagon body on, and it was a little gem, and we toured all over the area. And that we had, because of course we shopped at the PX, and we had all the Army facilities available to us, doctors and dentists and whatever we needed.
Right.
They took good care of us. They really did. They were interested in us. It was fun. It worked very nicely.
And then when you came back here, you lived in Knoxville.
I lived there with Uncle Doctor for a while. I took over his attic. And I had read Mary Poppins. Now this is years before the world discovered Mary Poppins, but I had read Mary Poppins to a class in the Great Neck schools, and they loved it. But they were all the British references. The baby carriage was a pram, and the street car was a tram, and they were all, and everything had to be explained to them. So what I was trying to do was take the Mary Poppins idea and make it American, make it a magical babysitter. So that's how Miss Pickett developed, and she's had quite a life.
And that was first published when? How long did it take from the idea to actually having a published book out there, Mom?
I think it was published in 1950. So I probably came home in 48.
That's quick. I mean, did you have a hard time getting it published, or how did you go about doing that?
No, Miss Pickett's had a charmed life. I just mailed it in. Just mailed the manuscript. I went to the library and looked some children's books over and decided I'd like Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston were the best looking children's books, so I sent it to them. And they call it Over the Transom now, and of course they have readers who read them, and it's just about 1 chance in 5 million. I mean, they get hundreds of manuscripts every day. I sent them the whole book. I didn't even send them one chapter. I sent them the whole book. And they asked for some revisions, not many, but they asked for some. And nobody was delighted, but they did. I didn't do anything about the illustrations or have any consideration with that. They just paid me an offer for them. Made me an offer and started paying me.
Yeah.
For the book, and then sent royalties as they sold. And then they wanted the second one, so I got busy on the second one. They wanted others, but by then I had gotten interested in getting married and having a family, and I'm sorry now, of course, that I didn't keep going.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
Yeah. Now remind me who Uncle Doctor is.
My mother was Ruth Martin.
Yep.
And her mother was Nanny Badgett. And Uncle Doctor's wife was Rebecca Badgett. They were sisters. So Uncle Doctor was actually my mother's uncle.
Okay.
So he was my great uncle.
Okay.
He was my great uncle. And see, Marguerite's mother was also a sister, so that makes Marguerite and mother cousins. Marguerite's mother, that's
Marguerite, Aunt Deet.
And Aunt Deet's the next generation. No, Aunt Deet's a cousin. Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah.
When you say Marguerite, Aunt Deet.
And no, Marguerite was somebody else. Do you remember Marguerite? She lived there. She never married, and she was kind of Uncle Doctor's housekeeper. She used to come for Thanksgiving dinner all the time and Christmas dinner.
Where?
You don't remember her?
Here?
Little gray-haired lady, yeah. She's the one that she gave you and John car.
Well, of course I remember her. Yeah,
that's Marguerite.
Well, who's Aunt Deet?
Aunt Deet is CM's mother, Adelia.
Oh.
Adelia.
But I never called Marguerite Aunt Deet.
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I don't know. You may have.
I think I did.
You may have.
I think I did. Yeah.
You may have.
That's what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Well, of course I remember Marguerite. Lived around the corner.
Yeah.
I went over there and stayed with her once in a while when she was scared or thought that she needed someone in the house.
Yeah.
And she always liked to drink well water. Didn't like city water. And had all that spearmint growing out in the back of our house.
I used to keep chickens there, and when I first moved in.
And had the old 1966 Buick that that she gave us.
Finally gave it up.
She kept it in the garage with all the tires flat for a long time and never drove it anywhere.
You're right.
Oh, yeah.
Well, she was Mother's cousin. And one other sweet story about Mother, when she moved back there to live with them, she and Marguerite were all going to take all these trips when Uncle Doctor died.
When she moved back
Mother moved from California to Knoxville while I was in Europe.
Yeah.
And she moved
to live with.
She lived with Marguerite and Uncle Doctor in the house on Scenic Drive.
On Scenic Drive, oh, okay.
But they were so sweet because she and Marguerite planned all these trips they were going to take when Uncle Doctor died. And of course, I think Mother knew it's better that they'd never take it.
Yeah.
You know, Marguerite wasn't about to budge. And but just yakety. They had all these plans made and all these things they were going to do as soon as Marguerite was no longer tied down. But of course, none of it ever worked out.
And she was tied down in what respect?
She had worked in Uncle Doctor's. He was a eye, ear, nose, and throat.
Okay.
And she had worked in his office and run his house for him. She was a maiden lady. She was his niece, and she took care of his house. And after his wife died, so Marguerite came to live with them long before. She was still a young woman.
Okay. And
the whole idea was, you take care of me and I'll take care of you. You know, so he left her very well off. But she took care of his house, bought his groceries and cooked the meals. They had help. They had maids and plenty of help, but I mean, she ran the house. And he was typical of his time. He would give her $10 to go to the grocery store, and then she'd come home and count out the change to him.
Oh, really?
So,
when did he die?
I'd have to think. I'm not sure, Charlie. We had your daddy and I had our wedding reception at that house, and he was alive then.
Oh, I didn't realize
So that's
that.
1952. So he must have died 54 or 55, right in there. Yeah, we had.
Where does Aunt Mildred fit into all this?
Now, Aunt Mildred is Daddy's family. That's my father's family. That's the Julians.
All right.
And when we were in California, we stopped to see Aunt Eva. And that was Aunt Mildred's sister. And then you met Uncle Ralph, the druggist.
Mm-hmm.
That was Aunt Mildred's brother.
Okay.
See, they had a big family of Julians, and that was my father was there. And then Uncle Mac was the one that lived in New Orleans. He was Aunt Mildred's brother also. But,
right. Okay.
They lived in Harriman, and the Martins lived in Kingston, but that was close enough to even then to
Right.
get together.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Now, at some point did you move up towards Gatlinburg, up to that area?
Oh, one of the things Mother did while she was living with Uncle Doctor and Marguerite, I think she just wanted to get out for a while, just get on her own. And she loved people. She took a job as the dining room hostess at the Greystone Hotel there in Gatlinburg, which was one of the real big ones at that time. And she ran the dining room and hired the waitresses and kept them in line and saw that everybody got served, and she enjoyed it. But now that was a seasonal job, just when the Gatlinburg was strictly a summer resort town then. There wasn't any big ski thing or nothing else going on. So I was working at Miller's, and I'd go up every weekend and spend the weekend with her. She had a room there in the hotel where she stayed.
Mm-hmm.
And she enjoyed that. She probably did that 2 or 3 years. She liked making a little money. And she was good with the people, and they loved her because she was pleasant and good looking. So that was fun. But no, I never did. But I remember I used to drive back to work early Monday morning, and that was beautiful, driving down, coming through, coming through that countryside at 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday, when I'm back to work. It's fun.
I bet. And so you got Miss Pickett going. You did a couple of Miss Picketts, and then got married and had some kids.
Didn't write anymore. No.
Yeah.
Didn't write anymore.
Well, you've kept up writing. I mean, you've written several books since then. You edited that book about gardening recently.
I did a history for the church, which was a labor of love, and so was this writing I've done lately has all been just what I wanted to do, and but I enjoyed doing that. And then the garden club, these were Miss Emily Bruner's class notes. She taught a horticulture class to all of us fledgling gardeners for years, and she was always going to write a book. Moved to Hilton Head with her son, so she obviously was never going to write the book. So we wrote and said, can we do it? Can we take your notes and put it together in a book? And her son said, yes, go ahead. So we did, and it was fun, and it was very successful. And then the latest one is the Baptist Hospital history book. I did a book for them back in 1980, and now they're celebrating their 50th anniversary, and they wanted to bring it up to date. So it'll be out this year because they want to get it out for the anniversary. But it'll probably be a paperback. 9 by 11, or something like that. Yeah. But I think they'll do a good job of it. I hope so.
At what point did you get so interested in gardening and horticulture, and where do you think that comes from?
I don't know. Aunt Mildred always had a strong interest in that and encouraged me. But I can remember in San Diego, we had a driveway that ran past the house down to the garage, and one summer I stayed home and went to summer school. My mother went to scout camp. Mother ran the kitchen at the scout camp, and when her public school job was over, she took over the kitchen at the camp. And I went to Girl Scout camp from way before I was too young to go till way after I was too old to be there. But I went every summer. There was no reason for me not to. So, but anyway, I gardened then. I remember having yellow crooked neck squash up both sides of that driveway, and it just grew like gangbusters.
Because Lucy wasn't into it at all, was she?
No, but so Aunt Mildred encouraged me, and then I've enjoyed that. And then of course I got into this really, really good garden club, and they taught me a lot.
Well, you started doing a lot of more technical things. You started propagating from seed and doing things in greenhouses and hot houses and under grow lights and all those sorts of things. I mean,
well, that was largely due to Miss Bruner's class, the one whose notes we took for the book. She usually taught the new garden club members, which meant she taught them once a month or once a week, maybe it was, for their first year in the garden club. And I went every year. I went for about 5 years. I'd keep going back with the next year's new members and the next year's new members and the next year's, and I of course learned something all the time.
Yeah.
But she was way ahead of herself in keeping up with what was going on. She introduced a lot of plants to this area. She was ordering things from catalogs just to see how they'd grow and experimenting with them. And she was a real crusader.
I mean, plants that had never been grown here before. She'd see if they would grow here. And
she introduced the Lenten rose to this area, and now it's one of the biggest plants in this area. And now it's sold in all the nursery catalogs now as a marvelous plant that blooms in January, which everybody loves, a unique plant that'll have such an early bloom. And she got it started here.
Right. Well, when you did your thing with the trailing arbutus, tell us a little bit about that, because that was the one that I think you propagated from seed that
won a big prize.
Yeah.
It was just supposed to be hard to do.
Yeah.
And I just got lucky, or got the seed at the right moment. So much of it is getting mature seed that's ready to plant. And of course, you're not supposed to take anything out of the national park, but these little seeds are about the size of cranberries, and I didn't mind picking 8 or 10 of them. I didn't think the park would miss them. But you had to pick them. I had to let them get ripe on the vine, and then pick them at the right time, and then get them in the right medium, and it just all worked. So then that went to a garden club show in Washington, D.C. as a six young plants, and they were just bowled over that anybody was propagating trailing arbutus from seed.
Well, had it been done before?
I'm sure it had been done before, but not lately, and they didn't expect some novice to do it anyway. So I was just, I don't know, I just got lucky. But it was fun, and I enjoyed the attention, and I got a big prize.
And you did a lot of traveling and working for the garden club since then, in recent years.
Yes.
And, has that been fun?
Very much, very much. Oh, they really know how to travel, and they know how to do things and entertain you. I mean, you're treated queenly, and it's fun. They always stay at the best hotels and eat at the best restaurants.
Is that mostly an educational thing, or is it a social thing, or what is it?
Both. It's a tax-free organization because they do a great lot of scholarships. They give a lot of scholarships in tropical botany, and lots at a college level, at a high school level. They put volunteers in all the national parks every summer. They do that. They do a lot of good work, but they also have an awfully good time. And it's both.
Yeah.
It's a very wealthy organization, something like $8 million endowment. So see, all these people, they have income from their money, endowment, and then they have dues money, and they maintain an office in New York, and they have been big annual meetings, and it's a nice organization, but it does have worthwhile goals. It does it stays tax exempt because of all the education efforts they do, but then it has horticulture and conservation are the other three big interests, and they've testified before Congress, before committees. The president of the Garden Club. On endangered species and things like that. They move around.
Now lately you've been teaching these computer classes at the local senior center. Why do you think you've gotten so interested in computers over the last, it's really just been the last, I don't think you even had a computer until maybe 7, 8 years ago.
Yeah. I had an electric typewriter and I wanted to get a word processor. And my son Charlie suggested that I not get a word processor, but I buy a computer and use the word processing part of the computer. So that's what I did. He did. He and Tom bought me my first computer and set it up. And of course he was in Chicago. Charlie was in Chicago at the time. And when I'd get stumped, I'd have to get on the phone and say, okay, Charlie, what do I do now? It's a little hard having an out-of-town consultant. But we worked it out. And it's been a very satisfactory interest. I've enjoyed it. And of course I really think, now that I don't have to teach, I enjoy teaching, and that's why I'm doing that. That's why I'm working out there. We have 10 students in a class now, 10 computers, and I like the introductory class. Well, I teach word processing too, and it's fun. The introductory though, people don't know, how to turn it on, and so you're really starting from scratch. And they're so surprised that they can learn so well and do so well. That gives a great satisfaction, and they can. There's no reason why not. They learn very well. So I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it very much.
So you're going to keep on doing that?
I'm going to keep on. Yeah. I'm backing off. I'm not going to do quite as much as I did. I'm teaching every other month now.
Yeah.
But that's all right with their schedule. And I like the schedule where you teach twice a week for a month. It's a 10-session. It's an 8-session class. And some of them teach once a week for 2 months to get the 8 sessions in. But I like twice a week teaching, so.
Do they pay for those classes, or are they?
Yeah, they pay. They pay $50, which doesn't do much.
But does it pay you anything to do?
No. The teachers are all volunteer, and they've got good teachers. They've got a good selection of teachers.
That's a good program.
But I think it is. It's a senior net organization out of California. San Francisco's their headquarters, and they set up these centers all over the country. And they come and train the teachers. They train the original teachers. And I took I saw in the paper where they were going to have these classes. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty good. I'll go and apply to take the teacher training. And if I fall on my face, then I'll just back up and enroll in a class. So I went over and took the teacher training, and I said, well, this is piece of cake. So I just started teaching for them.
And at that point, you still had the old
8088
computer. I mean, you still didn't have a hard drive or anything. So.
No.
Great.
But I had a good coach. I had a good coach. Good computer coach.
Now you did a history of the Smokies too at one point. You had a slideshow and everything. Tell them what prompted you to do that.
I did that for the World's Fair. Only somehow the World's Fair didn't find any use for it. But I thought all these tourists were going to come here in 1982 to this World's Fair, and they should know something about the Smokies.
Yep.
So I put together and I worked on it. Went up there in their files in the library, and they let me copy a bunch of old pictures to make slides out of, and I put together a slideshow that ran about 40 minutes. And I was hoping somebody would take it over and use it for the World's Fair, but they didn't. But nevertheless, I had a good time with it in that I showed it to hundreds of groups. Sometimes I charged for a while. I'd charge, and then I'd back off and not charge, and then I'd charge again. But I was charging $100 to show it to give a program there for a while, and I had a good time with it. I enjoyed it. I did it for people like the retired telephone people. People are always looking for speakers. Let's face it, there are a million organizations looking for speakers. But I did my history in kind of a lighthearted way, and that appealed to some people and not to other people. Frankly, some people would have liked a more scientific approach to it all, But I was talking about the early pioneers and
you focused quite a bit on the people who were in the park, as I recall.
Yes. And the park, of course, is a truly amazing area. And the fact that, see, out west when they got all those national parks going, that was federal property. And they said, this is going to stay federal property, which is fine. But this park was all privately owned.
Right.
Somebody was already had houses built, farms, and logging business. So they had to buy all that property, had to condemn it and buy it to create this park. I don't think it could ever happen again. I don't think anybody would hold still and let it happen again. And a lot of people hated to move. They had to shove them out. And some people couldn't wait to get out of the hills and get down to, someplace else.
Right.
It was.
What do you think about this project to catalog every plant species in the park?
I think it's marvelous. I think it's very ambitious, but I think it's very worthwhile because, as we talked earlier, this is a unique park in that there's such a tremendous variety of plants and trees. There are more trees in the Smoky Mountain Park than in all of Europe. There are more trees in the Smoky Mountain Park than in all of the western state parks. It's just national parks. It's just it's just historically got a tremendous variety of plants and flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's well worth doing. But it'll take them years. This park has been declared biosphere. Biosphere.
Right.
Biosphere there are about
reserve.
8 in the world that
Right.
are such unique situations that it's been fun to live this close to the park.
Yeah, well, it's been great. Well, what projects you going to get into in the future? Do you see more books or more slideshows?
I like having a project going, but I don't know. The pressure appeals to me less and less.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
There always seems to be something that comes along and presents itself.
Yeah, that's nice. It's nice because I like having something on the fire.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Anything else you want to talk about?
Well, is there any other family stuff you were interested in? We covered Martin's and Julian's, which is pretty much takes care of that.
I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about family stuff.
Oh, I have one story. Again, I seem to be hung up on Mother, but she's worth it. When my father died, I was about 12 years old in San Diego, and we had a service at the funeral home, and she had the body cremated, and then we all just kind of dismissed it from our minds. She had shipped my grandfather's body in the coffin back by train to be buried here, so she wasn't going through that again. So come to find out, she stored these ashes at the funeral home until we made a trip back here to Tennessee. We came back here, I guess, when I was about 15. This was 3 or 4 years later after he died. And Mother put my daddy's ashes under the front seat of the car and didn't tell Lucy and me, and we would have died if we'd known we were sitting on those ashes all the way across the country. But then when she came back here, she had a service and had him buried in the Harriman, had the ashes buried in the Harriman Cemetery and put a stone, which was a very smart thing to do. But I thought she handled it so well. She didn't ask us or tell us or let us in on any of her secrets. She just did it. We made several trips across the country, back and forth during summertime. We had a good time doing it. Well, Charlie, this was
There we go. Okay, Mom, here we are again.
All right, we're back.
We're back, and
We've been to dinner.
with your friend Kingston. We've been out to dinner.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you about Aunt Louise and just remind me where she fits into the family tree, if you could, please.
All right. Louise and Ben lived out in Powell, Tennessee, and she was Marguerite's sister. That makes her a cousin to my mother. And Ben was an old railroad man, retired early, fairly early, and they bought a farm out in Powell. They were an interesting couple, just as country as they could be and just as sweet and good-hearted as they could be, and they loved you two boys. And we went out there many times. In fact, as you mentioned, we have a 3-legged stool that Ben made. Here, still using it in the house. We've got tools that were his. After Ben died and Louise sold the farm, she had us out because she wanted to give us some things. And she got so busy feeding us, we never we never had time to talk about what we were going to take home. But I do have she gave me a chest of drawers, which is one of 3 nice chest of drawers that I have back there to hand down to countless grandchildren. But Louise was a sweet person, and she was a very nice cousin.
So her mother was
Her mother was one of the Badgetts.
one of the Badgetts.
The Badgett girls that lived over in out there in Riverbend. They had a farm out there, and the other Badgett sister was Roberta. Roberta had one blue eye and one green eye, and she never married. She stayed on the farm. She was the last one. And when the TVA dammed the lake and took all her good bottom land, she decided the farm was worthless, so she sold it and moved to town. She was a railroad buff, like a lot of people were in those days. She loved to watch the trains come and go. So she took an apartment down near the railroad station so she could go down. People could tell by the whistle which train it was, that kind of thing. And but of course now the farm that she sold has become a very exclusive residential district with lots and all those lots sell for thousands and thousands of dollars out there. But at that time it was no good because the river bottom was gone.
Right.
So, but we didn't talk enough about Lucy in the first chapter. So I wanted to mention some of the good times that Lucy and I had when we all lived there in Long Beach. She was working at the bank, and I was teaching school and living with Mother in a small house there on Claremont Street in Long Beach. And we used to go up to Los Angeles for lots of events, and one of them was Orson Welles had a tent show. He was it was like a vaudeville show. It was big, but it was in a big tent. And Mother and Lucy and I drove up one afternoon late to go to this tent show, and we were late arriving at the show. It had already started, and unfortunately, or luckily, we had seats right down front in the center. So we start down the aisle with our usher leading us, three of us, down toward the front of the seat while the show's going on the stage. And Orson Welles steps to the front of the stage and says, "Stop the music, stop, wait." And he looks right at us and says, "Where have you been? Couldn't you have started a few minutes earlier? We waited as long as we could." And of course the audience was just howling, and we were dying. Couldn't sneak into our seats, and we had to walk away in front of about 15 people to get over to our seats. But he kept it the whole time. "We tried to wait for you." And finally he said, "Now, are you ready? Shall we go on?" And he picked up his baton and the band started again. But it was a funny thing. Lucy and I went to see Gertrude Lawrence and Lady in the Dark. And that was a marvelous show. And Danny Kaye, that was his first big starring role. And so that was fun. Now I remember Lucy and I, we sat behind a post, and our necks were all out of whack by the time we left the theater, and we'd also taken our shoes off, and we couldn't get our feet swelled, and we couldn't get our shoes back on. So here we were with crooked necks and swollen feet leaving the theater, but we thought it was wonderful. It was great. Lucy was a fun person to do things with. Who else did? We were talking about the time in Germany and the school teachers. We had this German teacher who taught German to our students, and then I also took private lessons from him. And I got quite friendly with his family, and they were a dear family. They had been Nazis, of course. They had to be. He had to join the Nazi Party to keep his job. He had 3 children. His wife, the German bakery made this marvelous dark pumpernickel bread, and he and his family thought there was nothing more heavenly than old Wonder Bread, or that white bread that was in the PX. So every time we had a German lesson at the house, he would bring me pumpernickel, and I would give him old white bread, and I was delighted, and he was ecstatic to take that white bread home to his children. But we went on several field trips together. We'd go pick up his family on Sunday afternoon, and they'd take us to some old castle ruins or something like that, and it was interesting. And then I got that Marion Wells was a school teacher friend in Long Beach, and she wanted a class, she wanted a project for her school, so they took on this German family, Herr Dietrich's family. And one Christmas, I sent them the sizes of the children, and the school collected money and sent clothes. And of course, these children hadn't had any, the German children hadn't had any warm underwear or new socks in a long time. So it was a very successful project all the way along. And one of the things they did, to say thank you to the school, was send the school a lovely pair of leather lederhosen. And Marion kept them at the school and used them in the costume department for a long time, and then sent them to me. And I have them, and Charlie has worn them on Halloween when he was about 3 or 4 years old. You remember?
I do.
That's
Yep.
where the lederhosen came from. I think they're still in the attic.
Oh my.
But Marion, after she left school, she wanted me to have those, so she returned them to me. But that's a long, long
I
tale.
wonder how women could dress up Cody in those.
I don't know. Well, let's go look at them now and see how they fit. They might not be far from his size.
Think so?
I don't know. We'll see. Oh, it'll probably be a couple of years before
I think
we can
so.
wear them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Well, we can look at them.
okay.
We can see it.
We'll do it.
When did Lucy move back to Knoxville?
Let's see. Mother and I were both living here. I was not married, I don't believe. And her husband, Bill, became quite ill. He had, I don't know what he had, but he had to take a leave 6 months off from his banking job. He had an important job at the bank. And so he was taking a sick leave, a 6-month leave. And they moved back and took an apartment. And then he fell apart, he collapsed. So there was no point in, they knew he wasn't going to go back to work at the bank. So then Lucy, he died here and he's buried here, and Lucy just stayed on after that for a good many years before she went back to California. When they first came, they bought a little house on Tallaluna, and we lived side by side down there for a while. Then they moved to the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think Lucy liked California better than she did Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that. Anything else you think of that we haven't covered?
Anything you think of, Mom, to bring up there?
Oh, I wanted to tell about December the 7th, briefly, Pearl Harbor Day in California, because it was such a strange day. It was about noon, as I recall, when we really got the firm information that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And Mother and I had planned to go to a movie that afternoon, so we went ahead and went on to the movie. We didn't know what else to do. It was, if the West Coast was really scared because they thought they were next.
Right.
They thought the bombs were going to come, submarines were going to come up out of the water and shell the coastline. But we went on to the movie, and about halfway through the movie they stopped the show, and an announcement came on the screen that, will all the military personnel in the audience please report to their posts immediately. And if that didn't put a chill in the air, and say 50, 60 people throughout the theater got up and left, men back to their posts. And they played the rest of the movie, and we stayed through it. But it was a weird day, because then nobody knew what to expect, and nobody knew what to do or say or where to go. It was the last thing in the world we thought was such an attack as that was.
What time of day was that?
Well, we must have gone to an afternoon, about a 2 o'clock movie.
So,
And so it was probably about 3 when they called all
it was
the
morning in Hawaii,
Yeah.
so it would have been afternoon.
I think it was about noon at the house when we got that information.
Yeah.
And we had the radio on, of course, and listened to it for a couple of hours, and then we said, well, let's go ahead and go on with the movie.
And it was on a Sunday, wasn't it? Yeah.
But then, of course, they put up all the anti-aircraft balloons. They still thought that West Coast was in danger.
Which would make it hard for planes
to dive bomb.
Yeah.
They had all these dirigibles, that hung up there.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy.
It was a scary time.
It must have been.
It was a scary time. But we knew so little compared to the Gulf War, say. We didn't, it wasn't on TV, it wasn't in your face the whole time. Or the Vietnam War.
And the U.S. had not declared war on anybody at that point, had they?
No. We had been helping England by sending shiploads of supplies and things like that.
But the war was still pretty.
Yeah.
War was still pretty controversial, wasn't it? Getting in, or a lot of people thought, well, wait a minute, it's Europe's war, it's not our problem, and we shouldn't really be involved in it.
That's right.
And the Pearl Harbor attack changed all that.
Changed it all. Yeah, it was strange times.
I sure do appreciate you sharing some of these things with us, Mom. That's great.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Now, anything else while we got the machine up that's worth talking about?
I think not. I give my love to Cody and Julie.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.